Well, that's a very hard act to follow. Gosh, you guys are awesome. I loved it. So I'm Mike Appel. I farm with my partner, Emily. She's not able to make it today, but it's going to give you a little brief presentation about our weed management. Not nearly as impressive as what you guys are doing at Snugglebug. So we own kind of similar. We own 21 acres. We're certified organic, but we don't farm 21 acres, kind of the same with these guys. We have 2.5 acres in annuals, 2.5 acres in cover crop, fallow, an acre in perennials. Mostly those are apples and some asparagus. And then the rest is in kind of like, we've planted like thousands of trees. So a lot of it's in wildlife habitat. And we're actually seeing a lot of the benefits of that now, just bringing in a lot of beneficial insects. But that's another topic. We're a 2-person farm, so no hired labor, it's just Emily and I. We don't have any off-farm jobs. This is our full-time job. This is where we make our living. We have a 300-member CSA, which we sell to in Tulsa. Oh, and let me back up. Our farm is located about 20 miles west of Siloam Springs. So if people know the 412 corridor, we're off of that. So we're kind of in the Ozarky area. We're starting our 22nd season. So we've been doing this for quite a bit of time. So yeah. Oh, and I do like questions within the presentation. So if you do have questions, please interrupt me. So first, we're right off the bat, yeah.
Sorry, did you start like they did with full-time work and starting the farm?
Yeah, no, we went from a farm internship to starting our own farm. No, I never had another job. First off, before we get into the weeds, we have weeds. Lots of weeds. So unfortunately, I don't take pictures of those weeds, so I couldn't really put them into the presentation. So the presentation looks like we have no weeds. It's a lie. Okay, we do have weeds. So, but our philosophy is we kind of the same thing with using tarps and cover crops. We don't do a lot of tarping, but we do a lot of cover cropping. And that is the biggest recommendation I have for people getting into it. Either tarp it or cover crop your field before you plant anything. You have to get your control, especially over the perennial weeds, first. If you don't, you're going to be fighting them and it's going to be misery. So anytime people come to me and say, what do I need? I have this land, I want to farm it. I say, get into a cover crop. So that's really the first thing. And we found especially summer cover crops are key, not just over winter, but summer, for controlling perennial grasses like Bermuda and Johnson grass. It really helps a lot to get that under control. We do use a lot of tractor-based equipment, so we're on a little bit of different scale. I mean, we're not a huge farm, but we do rely a lot on tractors on our farm just to maintain that 2-person operation. Quick crops like salad mix, radishes, sweet turnips, they never get weeded. So they're just so quick. For us, it's not worth the time. Even if there is some weed pressure, we just don't have the time to dedicate to weeding those crops. So we let them go, and we found at that stage that there really doesn't impact yield terribly much. Once crops are well established, we also don't do a lot of weeding. We feel like they're kind of past the time when weeds will really cause a very big decrease in yield. I mean, we don't like weeds going to seed, so we'll try really hard to keep weeds from going to seed. But at that time of year, like in July, we're so focused on harvest, weeding does take a backseat. And weather and time always don't cooperate. So, we get these springs where we have tons of rain. It's really difficult to weed in that. So sometimes it's just not ideal, for us, and things get weedy. It just happens. So equipment, we have 1 and a 2-row cultivators, and I'll show pictures of this, and it'll make a little bit more sense. That it's called blind cultivation. It's behind the tractor, so I'm pulling it with the tractor. Unlike a cultivating tractor where you're looking down in the weeds or the bed, this is behind. So you have to have everything pretty much well lined up, so you're not cultivating your crops and killing them. So we do use the stirrup hoe as well, mainly for in row. So the cultivators, as you'll see pictures of, do the weeding for us between rows, but within the row, we do use stirrup hoes. We do use some handheld tools, mainly on carrots and onions. Those are the 2 biggest crops for us that weeds are the biggest issue. So that we do focus a little bit more on, spend a little bit more time on with carrots and onions, just because they are slower growing. They don't have a canopy that shades out weeds. We do use straw mulch. We have a neighbor that has just native pasture, so we're able to source it there. And that's mainly in the high tunnel and then on some asparagus. We use a row hipper for potatoes, and again, I'll show you the pictures of that. That'll make sense. We do some skim cultivating. Again, more pictures of that coming up. And that's mainly for very shallow tillage. And then we do use occasionally a flame weeder. Not a whole lot of it, but some in certain instances. So it all starts with bed preparation. So we use a rototiller to incorporate our cover crop, to create a seed bed, and then we use this Buckeye bed shaper. Our beds are on 60-inch centers, so 5 feet from furrow to furrow. This tool, you can kind of see that picture, creates a nice raised bed, and then you can see the lines on it. So with those lines correspond to our cultivators. So when we plant, if we plant on that middle row, that will correspond to our 1-row cultivator. And then we have another 2-row system with kind of the ones on either side of that 1 row, that corresponds to our 2-row cultivator. So as long as we're planting in a very straight line, the cultivators work great. If you deviate from that, they don't work great. So those were just bolts that we put on the back of the bed shaper. And then for 5 rows that we do like salad mix and radishes and turnips, that doesn't get any cultivation, but we have the 5 rows set up just so it's easier to do the planting. Okay, so planting and transplanting. So we use a Planet Junior seeder for quick things like radishes, turnips, some Asian greens, things like that. Generally do not get cultivated. And then we use a mechanical transplanter for transplanting. Kind of the same way Snugglebug does a lot of transplants, you get ahead of the weeds with it. So we do a lot of transplanting. We also have the paper pot transplanter that we use as well. But this is one that goes behind the tractor, and it is also set up to correspond with our 1 and 2 row cultivators. So if the transplanter is in the middle, it'll correspond with the 1 row cultivator. And if we can offset it and do one side going down and the other side coming back, that corresponds with our 2 row cultivator. So let's see. These are the cultivators. So on the left is the 1 row cultivator, and on the right is the 2 row cultivators. And this was all kind of just homemade stuff. You can get cultivators that are way more sophisticated, but this has worked for us kind of from the beginning. When we were first getting started, we had no money. So these were like $70. We went for it, and we haven't changed. They just work fairly well. So the way they operate is, so on either side, is there a pointer on this? Okay, yeah. So these shovels, those clean out the furrows, and they both have them on the 1 and 2 row. And then here we have these knives, and these knives just go kind of like just a little bit under the surface, just to lift up the soil a little bit and kill the weeds. And then for our raised beds, we also have these what's called banana knives, and those kind of take care of the sides of the beds. So yeah, so the 1 row, the crop would be right here in the middle, and then these just kind of slide on either side of the crop. And then for the 2 row, there's a crop there and a crop there. So you can see how a cultivated field looks of onions right here. The soil's all disturbed, killed the weeds, and that's kind of a closer up look of it. It does not work well if it's really wet. It does not work well if the weeds are really big, and it doesn't work well if the crop is really big. We don't have a very tall tractor to go over this. They do make cultivating tractors that have a lot more clearance. So there are limitations. You have to really stay on top of it. You have to get it when the weeds are small. So this is kind of what it looks like from my view on the tractor. I do get a lot of neck pain of just constantly having to look back, but I really enjoy this job when it's working well. It's really nice to see like a cultivated field come out fairly quickly. One of these is, yeah, please.
How wide are the tops of your beds?
That's a good question, and I should know the answer to that one.
Do you do so many inches on center or whatever between?
Yeah, so it's center to center is 60 inches. Is that the answer? Yeah, okay.
That should be like 30, 34.
Something in that range.
Yeah.
Let's see, one of these. So that's just cultivating some broccoli, cultivating onions, and I think this is the video. Yeah. Oh, that's loud. All right, we'll cut that off. But you can kind of see I'm going extremely slow. I'm going as slow as I possibly can on the tractor, and that way, if there is a mistake, I maybe killed one plant, not 100. So, because yeah, these things can kind of get, a knife can move. So usually every bed I go in, I go a little ways, I adjust things. It doesn't always go smoothly. There's a lot of adjusting going on. Maybe the transplanter was off a little bit, and so did you have a question? As often as I can, but this is in spring. I'm lucky if I can cultivate broccoli like 2 or 3 times. I feel that would be awesome. But sometimes it's once. It just really depends on how wet we are in the spring. And the conditions, you want it kind of a few days after a rain, so the soil's pretty friable. You don't want it too hard. Otherwise, it starts you get chunks coming out, and that could, especially with smaller crops, can kind of uplift them. Yeah, this is cultivating a 1 row. These are tomatoes, so just set up kind of the same way, but just for 1 rows. This is for cultivating this is the skim cultivator. This is for cultivating in between rows of tomatoes. So we plant our tomatoes pretty far apart. We do about 10 feet apart, just so we have a little golf cart that we can drive in the rows for tomatoes and harvest them. So this gives us some more space when harvesting. But we don't want to rototill in between the tomatoes just because, or the squash here, because it's really hard to walk on after that. So this is nice. It keeps the weeds under control. This skim cultivator works pretty similar to cultivators you just saw. There's just these knives that go just right under the surface of the soil. Here's the tomatoes, and then here's tomatoes when they're much bigger. So we can still get the skim cultivator in between that, and that helps keep those weeds under control. So for potatoes, we use this little thing called a row hipper. It just creates kind of more of a mound on the bed. So we're trying to hill the potatoes and control weeds. This one I go a little bit faster on just because I'm trying to throw more soil up around the potatoes. Potatoes, you can kind of see progression when they're small. This I usually hope to do this 3 times as well. Potatoes grow very fast, and when they get too big, that row hipper, I start chopping a lot of leaves, so I have to be careful about that one. So that's how the potatoes look at flowering stage. This is our little handheld tool that I love. I think it's called a Cape Cod weeder. So this one I love for the onions and the carrots, and you can kind of see me down there on my hands and knees. So this is probably what led to the torn meniscus. So yeah, that you see me there during that on onions and carrots. Those are the only 2 crops I'll be down on my hands and knees, and that's once I get done with that job, I feel relieved. That's usually a very big job every spring. But we'll use a hoe in between the onions, but I want to get a little bit closer, so I'll go through and use that handheld. Then we do have some non-hired labor. So we do use the stirrup hoe, kind of doing a lot of spot weeding. We'll use it again in between in between the plants, but we'll also use it when plants are a little bit bigger, just to kind of go around and try to keep any weeds going to seed on it. We did on this picture plant something in between the tomatoes, like a short crop of turnips, and that will just get tilled in. And I think we're there. This is the end. Yeah. Questions?
Great. Okay.
That was quick. Yeah, thank you.